So, welcome back to My Voice is a Weapon. Um, this is episode number 9 of the podcast. And I was gonna record a new episode yesterday, but I had to take care of a couple of things that just bureaucracy, I guess. And so, because I guess this is the right mood to do this, I want to talk about something that a lot of people think of, but they don't really go deeper into a little bit of the differences between one of these terms and the other, and they don't try to really do a deconstruction of everything that connects these two subjects, because they can be very different. They sound very similar. Apparently there's a little bit of feeling that you can get to the same point with both, but I think what I'm gonna do here is completely break it down, and I'm gonna talk about the differences between anger and hate and why exactly they can be so different. So for starters, I think there's a bigger emotional connection to anger. Anger is instantaneous, and it can be very chaotic and very damaging. But there's a difference. There is a difference, because with hate, perhaps you can control things a little more. Hate can be a little more calculated than anger. And I don't think anyone has done a little bit of a sociological study into this, because it's all connected to another term that can be very different, because it's a very broad term and you need to analyze in context what it means exactly. And that term is violence. And to what extent these three terms can have a positive connotation, because we always look at them in a very negative way. So we make it toxic to the point where everything that we extract from it is always bad. But I think we need to start looking in to figure out a way where what are the good things we can take from this? Is there a way to control anger? Is there a way to put anger into something that can become good? Is there a way to put hate and calculated hate into something good? Or is it really just all bad as we think it is? It's perhaps a more philosophical way to go through this, but I decided to bring this up because I watched Lex Friedman again. And this was probably the best podcast I ever listened to. His episode with former UFC fighter. Josh Barnett. So, former UFC fighter, MMA fighter, Josh Barnett was at Lex Friedman's podcast, and he spoke about he didn't use the terms, but he did mention anger and hate, but he was more talking about the broad subject of violence and how he viewed violence, and sometimes how he was able to take good things about violence, which is something very rare because most people just use violence as something completely dangerous and bad. But I think we're gonna relate these three subjects here in a completely different contextualization than Lex and Josh did on their podcast, which was insane. I recommend for anyone who is going to listen to that podcast, I highly recommend it. But also because I think the fact that Josh Barnett is not just an incredible MMA fighter, but also he's admitted this many times, he's a huge metal music fan, just like myself. So I highly recommend that you go into this getting some Nuclear Assault as a music background for the podcast. And you're gonna see that if you adjust the volume the right way, where you can be able to pay attention to what they're saying, but at the same time appreciating what's going on in the background with the music, and you're gonna correlate everything. And it's gonna be pretty cool and fun. It's a very fun experience. I was just amazed of how good that interview was and how well having those songs from the band Nuclear Assault, which is a thrash metal band from mid 80s, 90s, and insane how well it mashed together because of the subjects that they picked, the things that they were talking about, and it was just so fascinating. To me, it was absolutely insanely good. They made something that most people don't like to admit it can be good into something fucking excellent. And it's a little bit crazy that I'm saying this with such conviction, because trust me, I felt all of those things in a very bad way in my life, with very bad repercussions in some points of my life. And it's interesting because there's a lot of things that I was convinced about these subjects that, how can I explain this? There is such complexity here that is not even easy to bring the terminology the right way. How can I say this? Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna bring up, mostly, I'm gonna leave the broader subject of violence a little bit on the side here because I think that they did a phenomenal job of speaking about that I'm gonna leave that alone, right? So I'm gonna bring the subjects of, and I'm gonna try to break down the differences between anger and hate. And I'm gonna talk more specifically about calculated hate, which can be extremely cold and emotionless compared to anger that has that emotional value and it's more immediate. But trust me, the repercussions of calculated hate can be way worse because it's something that is planned and, can have very, very terrible consequences, to whomever is the target of that calculated hate. So this is very interesting, but it's very it's not hard to talk about it because it clearly I don't care, but it's complicated. It has a bunch of notches, and trust me, this is the right time for me to be talking about this because of a bunch of stuff that went on specifically yesterday, and I'm not gonna bore you with this shit, and also I don't want to get into it just because I do have a little bit of, I always had hate issues and anger issues, right? I think a lot of us suffer from that. But I'm not gonna come on out here and say that I relate to whatever the fuck or whoever the fuck, because that doesn't matter, because it's not true. I don't relate to anybody. I relate to me, okay? Let's get that straight. Bullshit aside, with that whole psychological idea that you can relate to others, fuck that bullshit, okay? First of all, that's fucking bullshit. Nobody relates to anybody else. That's just a scheme to make us think that we're sociable. Fuck that. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Alright? I'm coming here with something extremely complicated and vastly complex to break down. So here's what I want to start with. And anger, it's perhaps harder to keep at bay than hate is, because hate can be managed through time in a different way. The perspective of the way you hate something or someone or some people or whatever can change with time. You can still hate that, but the complexity of it is that through time you hate it in a different way, and maybe even for different reasons, or there are reasons that you find that you've added to the list. So you hate that person or group of people or that thing for those reasons, and it keeps adding at it. And perhaps there's ways to deal with that so that you don't go completely insane and end up doing something terrible to the target, right? And also, in a way, not to damage yourself in the process, because that's the problem. I don't think hate is what makes you go crazy and damage your own self in the process by going insane and doing some act of violence against someone and ending up in jail and completely screwing yourself in the process. Because let's face it, that person might end up harmed and in the hospital, or even worse, but you end up in prison, right? Because of the system, the legal system doesn't allow you to just, because you feel that you were wrong, you just can go on and deal with that in a very violent way. It doesn't work that way. So, because that's the invasion of freedom, right? If you go violent against someone to the point where you almost kill them, or you kill them, in fact, you're just invading their freedom to live. Therefore, you completely lost your privilege to have freedom in your life, and you end up in prison. So you just fucked up your own life, right? And that's where I'm going with this. I know it sounds a little bit not very empathetic, but the truth is, when somebody acts like that, let's say psychopaths, right? A serial killer, when they kill people, they're really in a state where they don't really care what they're doing, not even to themselves. That's why they do it. Because they know at some point they're going to get caught. And the process is exactly that. I, a lot of times, have to think, if I end up doing this terrible thing that I really want to do, because in the core of yourself, you think a lot that you really want to end up doing something to someone that you think did a bunch of shit that you didn't deserve to suffer in the first place. You go through that rabbit hole of thinking, if I end up doing that, I will fuck my life, and it doesn't matter what happens to him, or to her, or whoever, or whatever target you've got. It is a little bit selfish to think this way, but it's a way of thinking that it's just self-preservation, really. At that point, you don't have to be empathetic at all. You just need to be to protect yourself from getting into something that will completely fuck your own life. And perhaps that's where I think the calculated hate comes in. Because it's where, aside from the fact that you're trying to avoid getting angry and emotional about this, you enter a realm where you want to do it, but find a way not to get caught, and find a way to do it so that nobody knows that you did it. Or at least another way of looking at it is, do it in a way that nobody knows that that person or the target that you have is no longer there. But that's impossible, because one way or the other, with time, people start to question, well, what happened to this person? All of a sudden, in the back of their minds, they remembered, right? What happened to this? Even if you just know the person from occasionally being with them, but it's anyway, I guess I'm not saying that we should act upon those things. I'm just putting the perspective of understanding how different hate and anger is. And I think the breakdown here is that, at least I believe that anger is more connected to the emotion of the moment. Because yesterday, let me be very, very clear here. What happened to me is nothing that bad. It's not terrible. Nobody died, But I was extremely pissed because of how incompetent people are doing their jobs. And it bothers me to no end. But anyway, and I felt like going in with the dynamite explosive in my belt and just fuck it all up. But that's the immediate, reaction of anger. You get emotional, you get frustrated, you want to beat somebody up, but you don't do it for many reasons, many obvious reasons. You feel like, and another something else that I want everybody to understand is, because I hear this a lot and people seem to believe in this narratives that I don't really think are completely, I heard this a lot, and I think people need to really think about when they say this, because either they come up with this stupid excuses of, oh, you should do some exercise and it's gonna go away. Come on, seriously? The only thing that's gonna happen is when I'm doing exercise, I'll probably get tired and I forget about it while I'm doing the exercise. But then, do you really think that the hate just goes away like that by doing exercise? That's not how it works. Oh, then you should maybe go to a therapist or a psychologist. Again, I covered this. I don't believe in that bullshit. And I don't believe in those people for the reasons that I already said here in the podcast a couple of episodes ago. Alright, so I'm not going to cover that again. That's not a solution. That's not always the answer for this. It doesn't work that way. It shrinks, no. Just no. Fuck them. And the idea of doing some... okay, I understand, having a balanced lifestyle with some physical activity. Of course, yeah, that's good. I get that. But don't tell me that that's gonna fix my hate issues, or... That's fucking bullshit. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. I'm sorry. Okay? It's yeah, it might go away for a second, but you don't think it's gonna come back? You don't think that 30 minutes later I'm not gonna be thinking about... And specifically because you just told me, oh, you should go do some sports. Because I hear this a lot. I hear this a lot. And it's just... people don't have the notion to conceive what it means when you say that, and you think that that's the solution, right? Come on, seriously? So let me turn this around and be a little bit more specific. So why that doesn't work, okay? If it's that easy to just get rid of those issues like that, right? Which those are two specific issues that I deal with every day, anger and hate. I do. But if you go to someone who suffers depression and just, oh, you should just go outside more and talk to people. And what? Do you really think that that's going to solve anything, that person's life? Like, you feel depressed, just go out there and try to have a happier day? Come on. It doesn't work that way. That's not how things are. Okay? And yes, I take note that I should be someone who should be more active, because right now I'm not. But that's a different issue. That's something that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. Having a little bit of exercise every day is not gonna vanish my issues with, it's not gonna cure it either. It's fucking ridiculous, the stuff that I hear sometimes coming out of some people's, I'm not gonna say who tells me this. It's not what this is about, because I'm not gonna throw them under the bus, but these people are gonna listen to this and they know who they are. And perhaps they're gonna understand a little better why I'm saying this. Those deep-rooted issues don't go away just by exercising or by going to the shrink. And, well, some might argue that it does help. Maybe, a little bit. Might help a little bit, but shit. You have no idea. Right? No idea. Seriously. So, it's funny to me that some people have that conceived notion that those things just go away by... It's so off base. Stupidly off base. And I guess, I'm kind of starting to understand that, something else that I heard, you need to control more of what you say on your podcast. What? Seriously? You're gonna go into that bargain censorship bullshit? Oh, but it's just for your own security. Oh, fuck that, come on. Seriously, you think that I'm that important that if I say stuff like, fuck the government somewhere, they're gonna come looking after me? I mean, I'm not Joe Rogan with all of those millions of people listening to him every day, okay? I'm just a regular Joe doing this. Maybe one day I'll be a big deal, I don't know, perhaps, if I keep doing this and the audience keeps growing. But I know that I'm not that important. And I also know that I'm giving myself the right to say whatever the fuck I want, because this is my platform. So I don't give a shit. And perhaps that's one of the ways that I deal with this. I come here and say this stuff so that I don't go crazy killing in a killing spree somewhere. Perhaps it's a healthy way. Who knows? I don't believe I'm anywhere close. At some point in my life, I did kind of think about this, but I don't think I'm a psychopath. I don't have that working process. Okay, I'm not. But I do think that I could have the capability of someday doing something terrible to someone. But who doesn't think like that? Who with an operating brain doesn't think that when something shitty happens, who doesn't think, I wish I could kill that fucker, right? To some extent, everybody thinks like that. You don't do it, you don't act upon it for the reasons that I just exposed here. It's not just about caring about the other person, it's self-preservation. You don't do it because you don't want to end up fucking yourself, being in jail and suffering, losing your freedom. And fuck empathy at this point. Fuck it. It's not about that. You know, it's. I know this is very heavy. It's a heavy subject. Those terms are all obviously related to each other, but I think there are many ways to try to analyze, break it down, and bring stuff that are actually positive. For example, the fact that a lot of us are able to deal with this and go on with our lives without doing something terrible. That's positive. That's a hell of an accomplishment. That I don't go out there killing motherfuckers all the time, right? Because trust me, holy shit, do I want to? In my core? Fuck yes. I admit it. I wish I could do it. Holy shit. But hey, I don't. I don't do it. And it's not because I feel sorry for the fucker. It's not empathy. It's not because, oh, poor guy, poor family, poor whatever, the kids or whatever the fuck. It's self-preservation. I don't want to end up in jail. Right? So that's the positive about this. There is a way to deal with this and not end up doing something terrible to other people. And it has nothing to do with being empathetic or thinking about, oh, poor person that, you know. No. The fact is, it's pure self-preservation. It's, you know, if I don't want anybody to fuck with my freedom, I have to deal with the fact that I cannot fuck with anybody else's freedom. That's it. Because once I do, I lose my privileges automatically. Right? That's why anarchy never works. And hey, when I was younger, I believed in anarchy in some sort of way. But now I realize it's never a way to have any sort of controlled environment to because this is something that is extremely important. In order for us to be free, we need to have some sort of controlled environment. So we don't fuck with each other's freedom. And that, if you want to live in an anarchical setting, it's impossible. It's not going to work. You know why? Because the first thing that comes to my mind in an anarchic environment, it's self-government, right? I have my territory. If anybody that is not welcome comes in, I shoot them in the fucking face. That's anarchy. That's a way of looking at it. And it's not good. Because maybe that person was just coming to ask for something, ask for help. But I just decided that, no, not welcome. And you can't do that. So there aren't, you know. It's good that anarchy is just an idea. And I guess it's part of this as well, you know. Nothing to do with being empathetic, because the only way to live in society is respect each other's freedom. If I'm alive, it's because you're allowing me to be alive. The same goes to you. I am allowing you to live. As long as you don't bother me with your shit, fine. Go ahead. Live your life. Do whatever you want. Say whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. But that's what we need. That's the type of control and controlled environment we need. It's It's very complex, really. Because in many ways, that's a way to censor yourself. Because part of you inside is saying, with all this rage and anger, saying, who gives a shit, just kill the fucker, because you don't like that person for whatever reason, or reasons, in plural, right? So, it's, I guess, yeah, it's kind of crazy, because I don't know if I'm doing this very logically, but let me try to see if I can specifically explain what, for me, the definition of calculated hate is. Calculated hate is the thought process that you have in your head when you feel like doing something terrible in a way that nobody else will ever find out, but you know that with time someone can find out. So what you do is you just fantasize about that. You don't do it because it's almost impossible. At some point someone will find out that you did that terrible thing, so you don't go ahead and do it. You just use your fantasy all you want. Perhaps that's a healthy way to deal with. Just fantasize about, I don't know, decapitating whatever you need to decapitate, right? Or kill. And it's because that's the difference between, I guess, someone who's depressed and want to take away their own life, than someone who is just so full of, that, because I would never kill myself, I would kill everybody else. Fuck him. But that's the difference. I'll never harm myself because I like living my life, and I am proud of my life. Maybe I give less of a fuck about everybody else's, but hey, it's just the way it is. It's the way it is, and this might hurt some people, but understand this. This is very serious shit, and it's a way to contain everything that I have, right? So I know it sounds messed up because it is. It's completely messed up, but at the same time, people need to understand that perhaps it is a healthy way to deal with this shit. And I know that the listeners right now might be saying, holy shit, he's off his rockers. Maybe I am, but I'm not doing, and that's the other thing, right? The other part is sometimes, punching a wall and screaming and just cursing a lot. It's another way of letting out of all of that shit. It's an outlet, and of course others might feel uncomfortable, they might not like it, but understand it's better doing that than acting somewhere else and doing something else. Trust me. It's a big mindfuck, all of this is. And perhaps I might have chosen something that the audience might not be ready for, but I guess it's something that is important to understand. There's a lot of shit that is not easy to deal with, and in different ways. This is one of them. And I'm not just bringing this up just because it's something that I need to do, or no. The reason why I bring this up, because I think that a lot of people could take this information and think a little bit deeper about this, anger, hate, violence. Yes, it's all connected, and yes, a lot of it's terrifying, it's horrifying, it's the embryonic cell for nightmares. It's in a lot of ways, it's what gives people their worst nightmares, and some people they completely shelter themselves in trying to avoid that type of stuff because they think that's the safer way. But the problem is, when you do that, you don't realize that not everybody else is doing that. So when you're in a confrontation with someone about something that you differ from, that person might be a little bit in your face and you might not like it. How are you going to deal with that? Should just avoid the whole thing? Try to run away? That's not... Maybe it's not even possible. How do you run away if that person is right behind you? What if that person is bigger and faster than you and So sometimes you need to understand that those things will happen, and confrontation is not always avoidable. And it's sometimes it's even better if you actually get right on the face of that person and say, hey, you know what? Fuck you, man. And then you tell them why you want them to fuck themselves. And yeah, Lord. I need to come up with a way to explain this where I don't curse halfway of the podcast, because I understand some people really don't like that type of language, and I'm fully capable of doing this without the cursing in the middle, but it's a way of expressing and getting into that because that's the thing. This environment allows me to curse, but I know that I don't have to do it all the time, because otherwise it wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't. I just use certain words to get to a certain point, and perhaps occasionally I overuse them. That's fine. I get it. Maybe I could try to not do it as much. I can. But understand that that's the thing. Some subjects are permissive of that type of content and language, right? It gives you a bigger span of experimentation to use terms that obviously you don't want to use around kids or a specific set of people that might not be ready for this. But under this context and the preliminary subjects that I'm having to talk about on this specific episode on the podcast, it is a very different perspective if you add a little bit of colorful language, because it helps get straight to the point of what you're saying. It really does. I could do this in a completely different frame of mind and do it a little bit more with more calculation, but I think the result wouldn't be the same. And if I take out all the bad language and the cursory and that I'm using here, if I get rid of that, it becomes something that maybe is too robotic, and perhaps the sense of everything is not going to be as intense as I aimed that to be. Because that's another thing. It's extremely intense. This shit is very intense when you deal with it. Inside of you, you're controlling an atomic bomb that is about to explode. And it's like a clock bomb. I don't know, a clock going off. So I don't know if I succeeded in explaining this in a way that people will understand, because I don't know if I understand this whole concept. It's quite confusing as well. That's how complex it is. It's not so easy to get to the point of it. And yeah, it's perhaps this is the first time that I just come out with, because most episodes I start the podcast, I start recording. Sometimes if I feel that I said something the wrong way, or that it took too long to come up with something, and there's long silences, I just delete whatever I did and I start over. But on this occasion, I feel it's important for me to just upload this as it is, unedited, upload it the way it is, because although maybe not everybody understands what I'm trying to do here, at least they will try to think deeper about the subjects, because it is extremely interesting. Okay, once you start to looking at it with a different set of eyes and say, okay, let me put this on the table and start really doing a little bit of research on what all of this means. Okay? Because I truly think that hate can be a good thing if you know how to deal with it and use it. Of course, it sounds completely insane when I say it like this, because I'm not a specialist that can actually break it down. But the way I see it, I'm a human being that has dealt with this most of my life in different ways. And I guess now that I'm a little bit more mature, I understand perhaps how it works. Maybe I don't know how to explain it the proper way, but I understand how it works. Okay, I do. And inside of me, I know the things that I have to keep at bay, not to end up doing shit that I'm not supposed to do, because I will completely, and there's a part of empathy that does get in there, and it's a completely different. This is another mind fuck, okay? Because I just said that fuck empathy, but in that context, yes, fuck empathy. But in this context, because if I end up doing something like that, the people that are gonna suffer are not just the victims, but also my family, my immediate family. They're gonna feel terrible that I did this horrible thing, right? Well, where you think that my mother, my father, my brother, right? How do you think they're going to feel if they find out that I do something extreme to that point, right? Of harming someone, or even worse. And that's the part that I connect to this whole shit. That's the empathy part that I do connect to, because I don't want them to feel that way, right? And that's another part that is related to all of this. So it is really complex. It's a mindfuckery at best, because in one side you're saying fuck empathy, and on the other you're understanding that part of the empathy is there as well, chipping in. So it's a circle, and it goes round and round. The only thing that changes in that circle is, with time, your perspective about that circle changes. In some ways a lot, in other ways not so much. In some ways it doesn't change at all. So it's anything that you can do to try to take away the emotional side and put a little bit of logic in, it makes a good sauce to work with. Because I know it sounds too calculated and cold, but at the same time, it allows you to know exactly the things that you have to avoid. It makes you understand what not to do ever. Right? Now, I'm not saying that I'm never gonna do something terrible like that, because I can't control time. I don't know what the future looks like, right? And you never know what can happen. If I completely lose my mind, who knows? But having the advantage of knowing that I am not crazy makes me know how to get to that part of knowing, never do this, never ever do that, never, okay? And then you have that control over the fantasy of slashing somebody's throat open. And I know that not everybody thinks like this. I understand. But perhaps I have to think like this because it's a way to keep things at bay, control it. And don't fuck everything up. So, this is a subgenre of conversation that I don't see a lot of people having, because either they are afraid to go into subjects that are too painful to deal with. But trust me, allowing yourself to talk about stuff like this kind of helps. And I know it sounds very that I'm contradicting myself, because I don't like psychologists and I don't like shrinks in general. But it doesn't need to be in that environment. That's what I'm trying to bring up here. There's other ways for you to set this as a topic of conversation where you don't have to be in a therapist's office, okay? You don't. Actually, look at me. I'm using this as an outlet for this shit. Right? So, I don't know. Something else that I want to bring up, and it might be related to this in some way, is I hate that observation that a lot of people do, because I think it's a little bit unrealistic in the complete sense of the word. When people come to me and say, this let's see if I can get this straight. This idea that we're getting to know ourselves, it fucking irks me. Because I think it's a concept that is completely stupid and outdated. It's, oh, you need to get to know yourself better. You need to do things to get in touch with your inner self. Oh, please, come on. Seriously? Here's a fact, okay? During life, everybody changes. Through the course of your life, you change in different aspects your personality in one way or another, right? But at that very instance, I don't give a fuck what you tell me. I know who I am. I know what I'm doing, all right? At this moment, I know the kind of person I am, and I know exactly what I'm doing. Don't come to me and tell me that I need to find myself. That's just insane. And it's absurd, and it doesn't make any sense. You know why? Because in 3 years I might think a little different about what I am at that very moment. But it doesn't change the fact that I know what I'm doing and I know who I am. It doesn't. So get that fucking stupid idea out of my face. It's completely off point. All right. And it might be related to this in some sort of way, because when you tell someone like that, you don't realize that you're actually telling them to analyze themselves in a way that you think is just acute, but it can be very damaging, all right? Because you're telling someone that perhaps doesn't know they're going through something terrible to go look at the mirror and perhaps recognizing something that might be a little bit dangerous, because they might realize that their lives suck. So, and I had people say that to me a lot. I think at the time I just look at them and said whatever. But now I feel like, oh shit, that person is telling me that. What if I tell them the same thing? What would they feel like? What is their response to something like that? What if you turn it around and tell them, hey, why don't you go search for your inner self, jackass? Huh? And then the next day, that person ends up killing themselves because they found out stuff that they didn't want to know, right? So there is an element of fuckery there as well. It's a huge mind fuckery. But understand this, a better way of viewing it is you adapt your personality with time to the way that you're feeling, that you have to adjust certain things. Or not just feeling, you put some logic into certain aspects that you think are important. You change the way that you deal with certain stuff because you realize, oh, this didn't work. Well, let's try something else. And that's a logical way of viewing things, right? It's not just all about feelings and stuff, right? But hey, And that, oh, here it is. See, the what I think, and maybe I might be completely wrong about this, but this is what I think, and perhaps I might go somewhere with this, or maybe I go nowhere. But what I think is, when I say that anger is connected to the emotion and it's more instant, is because I think that hate can be completely something that is connected to logic. There are logical ways to use hate. And I know it sounds completely... some people are being very traumatized after hearing this. But if you go back to history, Hitler used hate in a very logical way. He put it in the balance. What he did, the way he didn't, it's not like of course, the way that he expressed himself made it look like he was always angry. And there are memes over the internet where you can find when he was doing his pitches, he sounded angry. And perhaps this is a more comedic way to tell this, but he used logic to use his hate for the Jews. Okay, he used a lot of logic and a lot of strategy to put that hate into work. So that's the nudge of what I wanted to do when I said that I wanted to break this down and see the differences between one term and another. And I think anger is a lot more connected to emotions. It's more instantaneous. Is at that moment you feel like breaking something or fighting someone because you're completely frustrated and upset, right? And it goes to that extreme where your emotions are just exploding. So you do stuff that is violent. But that's what I meant with calculated hate. It goes more to the logical sense. And it's kind of, when you start thinking and strategizing about stuff that perhaps you have to leave it alone. Because you're going into something that, of course, Hitler did it in a way because he involved a lot of people in this. So he made it, his strategy was collective. The way he thought about this is, I need to convince a bunch of people to think exactly the way that I think about this, so that they will help me kill a bunch of other people. And I know it sounds crazy, but there is a logic in this. He strategized for years to have this type of shit done. Right? The only reason for Second World War is Hitler. And Hitler used the first war as an excuse to go into the second war. So it's a strategy. He used a bunch of ways and ideas to strategize, to get people behind him to do some atrocities. Right? To commit atrocities against innocent people. That's what he did. And that's the best way to explain this. Those are, for me, the differences between anger and hate. It's a very, I strongly believe that this is a very valid point here. And perhaps we should take this in, right? I understand it's it's a very difficult subject to talk about. It's not easy. And I think I'm gonna end this episode on this note. Let everybody think about this. And one last time, I highly recommend Lex Friedman's podcast with Josh Barnett. Okay, it's not exactly along these lines because they talk about they go into a little bit of the physics and the philosophy, and they talk about Nietzsche and people like that. What I'm doing is just what I'm doing here is just my intake about all of this. And I hope people try to understand where I'm coming from with all of this. Maybe it took me a while to get to where I wanted because it's so complex that you have to really think deep and grab some very conscious thoughts about what you're saying here. And this is not about censoring stuff. It's just because in these subjects you have to carefully pick what you're going to say for good reasons, right? It's not about censoring myself. It's more about taking care of legal stuff, not going into shit that is, it's going to make me go to court because I don't want that. That's right. So yeah, I'm gonna leave on that note. This might be the longest episode, and I guess, I'm gonna leave it at this, and I want to thank everybody. And I guess on the next episode, I'm gonna talk about something else because this was dense. Holy shit. Just to finish, I'm not gonna be talking about the stats anymore for good reason. I think it's if I get obsessed about those numbers, it cannot be healthy for the continuation of the podcast and for me. So I'm gonna try to let go of that. I'm still looking at the stats just because to see the result and the growth of the podcast, but I'm gonna try to let go a little bit off of that. I think it's there are more important stuff to take care of than being worried about that type of shit. So I'm gonna try not to look to the stats as much. So on that note, thank you very much. I'll be back with another episode maybe later or tomorrow. I'm not sure, so I'm not gonna make any promises. Meanwhile, take care and be back next time.